Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kevin, and we are inside China. It is remarkable to observe the total dominance China has on the supply chains and how it seems to go all the way up to the factories, no matter where they are in the world, and how it extends down to the logistics trains to get it here to China, the refineries, the factories that produce it, and then the outbound logistics to get it to wholesalers around the world, no matter where they are. And for the past 30 years, this has been a good deal for China. They have happily become the manufacturer for the whole world and allowed American and European companies to make big profits just by taking China manufactured goods, putting it into their own box, and charging high prices and enjoying high profits from branding and customer service. So now the Chinese have figured out that what they have been doing is actually the hard part. That the branding, the merchandising, the marketing, the advertising, that's all pretty easy compared to the work they have been doing. And so now they are happy to move down the supply chain, get closer to the customers, and take those profits for themselves. It is human nature, and it's comforting to tell ourselves that our particular career or our particular company or our particular industry is safe, that it is immune somehow from foreign competition, especially competition from a country on the other side of the world. But except in very rare circumstances, very unique situations, it's just not true. And I can tell you that Chinese governments, local governments, industries, companies have a plan to take over almost every single high-paying job in the world. Even if a Chinese company doesn't directly benefit, they will disrupt these industries enough that it's going to cause a lot of people a lot of problems. What follows next are several high-paying jobs in the U.S. Conventional wisdom says that these careers have great benefits and salaries for many years to come. The conventional wisdom here is wrong. They will not survive the China competition that's coming. Over the next 10 years, they will shrink or in many cases collapse completely, along with the job opportunities and salaries of anyone inside these industries. So, in no particular order, here they are. The business model for a modern American university is offensive. It's revolting even to anyone who studies it and understands it. If there is an industry on this planet that charges more and delivers less, then I don't know about it. Almost all the bloat, the spending gluts that have happened in universities has happened right here at the university administration level. If you look at the number of professors and instructors, the number of janitorial service workers, food service, the people you need to actually deliver instruction to the students and provide for the students, those percentages have not moved in over a generation. All the excess spending has been here. And so as university enrollments fall, especially if they fall on the international student side, this is the first place the cuts are going to be. A lot of the extra money that the universities have had to spend over the last 30 years has come from Chinese students who go abroad. And the population of these Chinese students is falling fast. Demographics is seeing to that. There are simply fewer Chinese who are of high school age today than there were 10 years ago. Over the past 15 years, on average, 300,000 students from China per year went to the US for university. The average cost for each of those students was, on average, over 30,000 US dollars per year. That is $9 billion every year that is washed into the US university system from Chinese families. And that is all going away. One significant factor at play here is that the Chinese are building a lot of high quality universities for engineering, for architecture, for sciences, for math, for everything. And it is presenting Chinese families with a very good quality option, a very good alternative compared to going to the US. Are these Chinese universities as good as a US top 50 college? Probably not. But is a US university 50 times better? Because it's priced like it's 50 times better. And it's a very good question to ask. Why are US universities so dependent on Chinese families and Chinese money? Why is it easier for a Chinese student to go to University of California than a Chinese American from California to go to University of California? All these big state schools like Michigan, Virginia, North Carolina, Texas, Cal, the top ones, the best public universities in the world, they have waiting lists that go forever. So why do they come to China? Why do they send recruiting teams to China to talk to Chinese students and their parents to try to get them to go there? And the answer is because of money. Chinese students pay full tuition, full room and board, and they dump a lot of money into the local economy. $30,000 or more on average for each Chinese kid who says yes every year for 4 years. So Chinese students and their families are viewed by American colleges and universities as a giant cow to be milked for 4 years, or if they're lucky, 6 if they can sell graduate school too. And then what happens? After graduation, the Chinese graduates usually come back here. And Chinese media is very happy to report that Chinese students who go abroad to study in university have a harder time finding jobs here in China than students who graduate China universities. Because if you go abroad, you do not develop the relationships you need that will help you later in your career. You don't develop the alumni networks that the Chinese universities now enjoy here. So it's even more difficult for a China kid to get a good job after graduating from a school in the US or Europe. And now everybody kind of knows that here in China. So between just the trends in population and the developments here in China with respect to China graduates who are choosing to stay here instead of going abroad, the American university business model, which depends on foreign students, is starting to fall apart. You're also going to run into a problem with students from other countries. China right now is offering hundreds of thousands of scholarships, places in China universities for free. Students from Asia, Africa, Latin America are coming here and studying in English, engineering, medicine, agriculture sciences, anything they want, business. And you might argue that that's a stupid decision for a Chinese university to give away scholarship for free. But from the China government perspective, this is an important step in cementing long-term good relationships with other countries. If you're a student from Chile, for example, and you want to study engineering, you're considering going to China or the United States. The United States is going to charge you $250,000 to go there. China will let you study here for free. After he graduates and becomes a business executive in 10 years or a CEO in 20 years, who do you think he's going to be more disposed to do business with? Who is he going to be friendlier with? China, obviously. This is their consideration, and this is what's driving this impulse to bring as many foreign kids from foreign countries to the universities here. We are aware too that these same cost-benefit analyses are being done finally by millions of American families who are finally now starting to question whether they're really getting good return on investment from their U.S. university education. In China, that question is already answering itself. The Chinese kids aren't coming anymore. And they're bringing the foreign students from other countries with them to China. Frankly, all American universities had to do in the past 30 years was keep your cost increases roughly in line with inflation. Instead, you charged 2 or 3 times the actual inflation rate, and now you've priced your product so far beyond the reach of normal people that normal people are just saying no. University administrators are in big trouble, and this is why. Farmers in the United States and Canada, this is the one occupation on the list that's counterintuitive and a little bit difficult to defend. But global events recently have shown that the export markets particularly are going to be put under real stress here. And your margins, especially doing export, food business and agriculture, are going to be shrinking considerably over the next 10 years. So let's begin with this, which is that China is a massive net importer of food. They do not produce enough food of their own to feed themselves. They are the biggest net importer in the whole world. That is not true of Canada or the United States. It's never been true. But for China, it is just a reality that they must maintain good relations with companies that do produce surplus food. Russia, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Argentina, Africa, parts of the world that we would not consider doing business with. It is a necessity for China to. And we are also aware of this fact, that we need to produce, harvest, and distribute as much food in the next 20 years as we have done in the previous 10,000 years. And nobody really has an idea of if we can do that or how. The population trends will take care of themselves after about 20 years. That's when this big population bulge will kind of become elderly and drop off, and then it won't be a concern anymore. It's kind of like a pig going through a python. So if we can get through the next 20 years, we'll be fine. And to be honest, we still don't know if we're going to make it. But the situation does look much better today than it did 5 years ago, and a lot better than it did 10 years ago. And the reason that the outlook has improved so fast is that during this time, China has flooded the world with high-quality, low-cost farming equipment. They have sent machines to Africa, to Latin America, to other countries here in Asia. And these machines and techniques have radically, dramatically improved crop yields and production in these countries. So there is reason to be cautiously optimistic here. And this thesis was kind of put to the test in the early days of the Russia-Ukraine war, when there were big price spikes in food globally because two huge food-producing countries were at war with each other. Their young men were killing each other instead of growing food. And except in the high inflation countries like the United States and Europe, food prices have come down since those days. In fact, it's less expensive now to go to a supermarket in China than it was in the months before the war. And it's much less expensive than it was 5 years ago. Therefore, as Chinese equipment continues to find their way into the developing world, increasing food production there, there's just going to be simply less demand required from American and Canadian farms. Also, the Russia war is going to end sometime, and then they're going to turn on those export markets again. There is still a lot that can go wrong with this picture. And anything that does go wrong will benefit American and Canadian farmers. But the question kind of becomes moot anyway after about 2045, 2050, because that's when these demographic trends start to really assert themselves. That's when we're going to see real population declines across the developed world. North American farmers from the United States and from Canada are still the most productive in the world per acre. However, almost all the gains in productivity recently have happened in the developing world, courtesy of massive volumes of China agriculture equipment and precision techniques that are now being used almost everywhere. If that continues, then we should expect to see further declines in export demand from North America, because supplies are going to be rising in the places they're needed the most. Online stores are the lowest hanging fruit of all. There are hundreds of thousands of stores that operate on Amazon, on eBay, on Shopify, and other sites. They exist only to take products from a Chinese factory, mark up the price a lot, advertise on Amazon, and let a third party handle the logistics, the delivery, the banking, customer service. This entire industry is about to go away. Amazon is very busy here in China. They're growing like crazy, but they're not here to sell anything. Chinese people don't use Amazon to buy. Amazon is here to work directly with the factories. China factories understand that Amazon has the best online store in the world. They understand that Amazon has the best warehouse and order fulfillment in the world. They understand that Amazon has the best logistics in the world. And they understand that by cooperating with Amazon directly, they can take all the profits and share it with each other instead of with an intermediary online store. And that is the plan. If you have a company that involves taking products made here and selling it to customers there, they are Amazon's customers, by the way, they're not yours, then your business is already living on borrowed time. And if you have a lot of product that's in an Amazon fulfillment warehouse that you've already paid for, you should strongly consider liquidating them and going away, or at least having a much lower inventory count than you're used to. Because these are businesses that Amazon and the China factories are going to be taking for themselves. The pharmaceutical industry in Western countries is in a lot of trouble in coming years because of high Chinese competition in this space. But pharmacists and pharmacies, you're going to be the first to go. This is mainly a supply chain story. China has dominance in what's called APIs. APIs are active pharmaceutical ingredients, and APIs are what causes the drug to work, what causes the desired effects from the drug. For example, the active pharmaceutical ingredient of an anti-inflammatory is the part of the drug that reduces the swelling. All the other components of a drug or a pill that you take, the shape, the color, the packaging, the extra ingredients that make it easier to swallow or digest, all that stuff is added by the brand itself, by the company that produces it. But those companies can't produce the drug at all without the APIs, and those all come from China now. And we saw this problem in the early days of the pandemic, when hospitals could not get the drugs they ordered, even if the drug was coming from an Indian company or a European company. Those companies couldn't get the APIs they ordered from China because the supply chains were so messed up, especially in the early days. So this is a very similar situation faced by major companies and other industries. Decade after decade of outsourcing to China has resulted in China companies eventually having key monopolies at certain points of the supply chain. And now they can move down the supply chain, cut out all the middlemen in between them and the customer, in this case, the patients. And this is how Amazon is going to help them again. Amazon solves the last mile problem to the customers, the patients. They can also help with branding and marketing and packaging. And they can also assist in the regulatory and legal side that's going to be necessary to be able to operate in the United States. So there is an entire industry of middlemen and intermediaries who are just going to go away here. The external wholesalers for the drug companies, all the way down to the individual pharmacies like Rite Aid, Walgreens, and CVS, and the pharmacists who work in them. They're all just going to go away. If you are a pharmacy or a pharmacist that's attached to a hospital or some kind of inpatient treatment center, you're probably going to be okay. These are, after all, major profit centers for hospitals, and you're still going to probably be able to get away with charging $30 for an aspirin because the patient is upstairs in a bed. For everybody else, though, there's going to be big problems coming in this industry. This is an entire business that's just begging to be reformed anyway. And everybody wants lower drug prices, especially governments, especially European and American governments who shell out tens of billions of dollars a year in drug prices that most of which go directly to companies' bottom lines. On the regulatory and on the political side, We're likely to see politicians give big speeches about how concerned they are about the Chinese taking over this industry, but nobody will really want to do anything about it. So they might give big speeches and write some laws, but no American lawmaker is going to argue that we should continue to send billions of dollars to Switzerland or Ireland or India because those companies are not Chinese. It just won't work. High-end factory workers, by this we mean factory employees making high-value products. There are two realities in China which seem to contradict each other. The first is that there is a very serious recession here. Youth unemployment is very high, and it's much less expensive to find factory labor at low prices today than at any time in the past decade. The second reality is that China factories are automating at the fastest rate in the world. They are building out the robotics industry at record rates. So why is that? Why does the government here encourage their factories to automate instead of just hiring workers here who need the jobs? What China understands is that a robot that replaces an American job is 8 times more valuable than a robot that replaces a Chinese job. An American factory worker of high-end products is very well paid. They're often members of unions which have been very successful lately in extracting very large wage and benefit concessions from employers. The benefits of automation and robotics are pretty obvious. Robots don't get sick, they don't take sick days, they don't go on vacation, they don't need lunch breaks, they don't need food, they don't go on strike, they don't sexually harass other robots or get other robots pregnant. And China governments and industries understand that the first country who can successfully automate their own factories will be able to successfully automate factories anywhere else in the world. And so that's what the Chinese are doing. They're automating their factories, they're building robots simply to gain experience in taking over the highest paid jobs in America and Europe. They already enjoy supply chain dominance in all the things that go into making a manufactured product. And now they're coming out to the highest cost input of all, which is labor. These robots are being designed and installed right now to do the highest value labor in the world. This isn't to do hats and gloves. It's to do machine parts. It's to do airplane parts, medical equipment. If you are working at a factory and you are making more than $30 an hour plus benefits, there are thousands of people right now here in China designing robots that's going to do your job. They're studying the movements that you make, the tools that you use, and they're going to build the robots that can be used to replace your job. They're going to build those products themselves, and the cost of labor will be the same as the cost of the electricity used to power the robots. And this is another example of an industry where politicians will do a lot of talking, but not be able to do a lot of doing. If you're in, for example, a very pro-union state like Illinois, for example, where the wages are very high and they can pass laws pretty easily to keep factories out. There's nothing to stop them from going to Tennessee instead, or Texas, or Mexico, or Vietnam. They can get around tariffs just by going to Vietnam or Mexico. So it's not going to help you if a company can relocate across the street, or across the country, or across the border, or across the world. If a job can be done by a machine, it will be done by a machine. And China wants all those machines to be built here in China. That is why they're willing to sacrifice temporarily their employment situation in order to gain big advantages here in this industry. Oil and gas workers. The energy industry in North America is going to be hit with a lot of supply and demand problems over coming years. And you can point to China as the source of almost all these problems. So we should begin with this, which is that the United States and Canada are still high-cost centers for crude oil production. The industries there need high price points in the crude markets, especially for horizontal drilling and for energy production in shale formations. It's still much more expensive to extract oil from North America than it is from the Middle East or Russia or in other oil-producing countries. Global demand destruction of fossil fuels is a real story, and it's being all powered by China. Electric vehicles have not caught on in North America the way they have almost everywhere else, and it might never happen because oil is very plentiful there, and gas is still pretty inexpensive compared to the rest of the world. But everywhere else, it is happening. China is now the biggest exporter of vehicles in the world. They're the biggest car maker in the world. And almost all those cars going to the export market are electric. Every single one of those electric cars is a hit to future crude oil demand. That is going to put a ceiling on prices for a long time to come. There is another story here too that is not being reported very much, which is the revolution in e-bikes and electric scooters. These mini e-bikes destroy fossil fuel demand 4 times faster than all the electric vehicles on the planet. And all those are made in China or in India. But this is also a supply side problem. To repeat, the U.S. is still a high-cost producer compared to Russia and Middle Eastern countries. As global oil prices fall, these countries will have an even bigger incentive to pump more. and that will further depress prices. In the supply situation too, there's another problem, which is that China is mopping up a lot of the supply and production coming from Russia, Iran, Venezuela. They're doing it outside the Western banking system, the SWIFT system, and they're using their own yuan, China RMB denominated swap lines to make the trade go. And it is also very common practice for these cargoes to be offloaded into Chinese terminals here and then resold by China companies to other consumers across the Pacific Rim. To repeat these last 2 points for added emphasis, more and more and more of the global energy trade is being done outside the dollar in the China banking system using their swap lines. And more of the trade is being done on China's enormous fleet of tankers and pipelines. It is difficult to see any good news here long term for the oil and gas sector in the US and Canada. I know that there's been a lot of success in the LNG, the liquefied natural gas space. I think those are going away too. Russia here in the Far East is rapidly building out their LNG capacity, and we already believe they can supply the entire Pacific Rim with natural gas. And natural gas would still be very widely used in America because more and more electrical generation is coming from that source. But LNG and export, a lot of that's going to be going away.